Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Georgina Bisby, and today in this video I'm going to give you a beginner's guide to using a drill. Now, if you don't already have a drill, I happen to already have this cordless one here, so I'm going to be using this one today. But if you're going out to buy one for the first time, you might be wondering, should you buy a plug-in drill or a cordless drill like this one? So this cordless drill basically runs on batteries, which are on the bottom here, and a plug-in one, you plug it into the wall. And there's a lot of kind of hype around cordless drills being the best now, but actually there's a few things to think about. So with a corded or a plug-in drill, they're a lot cheaper than these battery-powered drills. And one thing that really surprises people when they buy these is actually a lot of the cost of the drill is in the battery itself. So once that runs out, which they inevitably do, and you have to replace the battery, it costs almost as much as the drill itself. Whereas with a corded drill, it may well last you forever. They're pretty reliable. Secondly, because with a corded drill, a plug-in drill, you don't have the battery, it's actually a lot lighter and easier to use because you're not lugging around that heavy battery with you as well. So if you're looking for something fairly lightweight that you feel confident using, it might be worth considering it from that perspective as well. But they tend to actually perform better as well because you've got a more consistent power supply. And also, if you're not using your drill that often, and once you've finished with it and you put it away in the cupboard, you'll find the battery drains. When you go to use it, you might have to charge up the battery, whereas if it's a plug-in one, it's always ready to go wherever you are. However, all of that said, there are some advantages to cordless drills. Of course, the big one being that they're really convenient because you don't have to plug them in, so you can go anywhere with them. You're not relying on a power supply or, extension leads or anything else. And that in itself is another thing that you don't have any leads to fall over, so they can be a bit safer as well. If you do decide to go for a cordless drill, you might be wondering what battery power you need. You'll probably see a lot of drills advertised as 18 volt, or in America that's actually referred to as 20 volt. Now that's pretty good for most DIY jobs. You'll find that that's what most tradespeople use, so perfectly adequate for most things you want to do. There is another option though, which is 12 volts, so that's a little bit less powerful, but depending on what you're doing, it may actually be perfectly adequate because it'll get into most surfaces quite easily, particularly soft walls, which a lot of buildings now, a lot of our homes are soft walls. If you're trying to get into really hard brick, you might want to consider an 18 volt, but for a lot of jobs, 12 volt may well meet your needs. It'll be cheaper, even smaller and lighter as well. So if you're not too confident about handling a drill, you may find that to start with, certainly a 12 volt is definitely worth a look. Whichever drill you choose, I would recommend going to a store that sells drills and having a look at them, having a feel of them, picking them up, seeing whether or not you would feel confident with that weight, that size, the handle, all of those things. And you'll also find that a lot of the shops that sell these drills actually sell them as loss leaders. So you'll be able to get, for that very entry level drill, you'll be able to get a good brand at a really good price, and not many people know that. So what are some jobs that you can use a drill for? Well, you can use a drill to create holes, but you can also use a drill to screw screws in and to take screws out as well. So typical DIY jobs that you might want to use your drill for include fixing a TV bracket, putting up a shelf, putting up some hooks, putting up a picture rail, putting furniture together and taking furniture apart. So next up, let's take a closer look at the drill itself. So first up, inside here you will have your drill's motor, and your motor is what takes power and converts that into motion, put very simply. Most of these motors now you will see advertised as brushless, and that just means that they don't rely on brushes, so therefore there's no maintenance and they're a bit more consistent in terms of performance as well. So next up in the middle here we have our controls, or our settings if you like, and depending on what job you're doing with your drill will depend what setting you want to put it on. So make sure you get this right to ensure your drill performs properly. So for example, if we want to drill into a wall and it's just a soft, sort of a soft block wall, then this drill setting here will be absolutely fine. But if you've got a hard surface like masonry, like brick or something, so our house for example is, traditional bricks and it is a bit tougher to get into, you may want to go onto the hammer setting, and that's this one here. Normally it will be depicted by a picture of a hammer like that. And that just adds to your drilling a bit of hammering from the back just to penetrate into that harder surface. The other setting that you need to know about is screwing. So we can continue to turn this clockwise and we'll get onto our screwing settings. Now that will be a choice of numbers. So we've got 13 right down to number 1. And the best thing to do with these numbers is start low. So start on number 1, because if you go straight onto a high number, you can risk over screwing, and that means you can risk basically ruining your screw head and even driving too far into something. So say for example you're putting a piece of flat pack furniture together. if you go and do that on a piece of flat pack furniture, you can actually make the furniture split, for example. So much better, especially as a beginner, to proceed with caution and start low and work your way up. And what you'll find is if you're on a low number and you need more power, then it'll basically stop. It'll make a funny little angry noise like this, and that will mean that it won't carry on. It's stopping that process for you. So then you can start dialing up through the numbers and putting a bit more force and just carry on like that. But it's much better to go through it that way than start on that high number and then end up in trouble. The other thing you might want to do with your drill is unscrew things. So for example, you might want to take some furniture apart. So you've got another little control for this underneath your main controls here, and that's your forward reverse button. And depending on which way that's pressed will depend which way the drill turns. If it's turning clockwise, it will be screwing things in, and if it's turning anti-clockwise, it will be unscrewing things. And finally, if you leave this button central, you'll find it won't actually spin either way. So this is quite a good safety setting to have it in when the drill's not in use. The other little setting or control you've got on the top here is your gears. So 1 and 2 on this one. And I would, as a beginner, always start in number 1, because a bit like in a car, that's just going to give you a bit more control. As you grow in confidence, you may feel happy to go to number 2, but definitely start in this position. Also, under your controls, you've got your trigger. Now, not too much to explain about this one. You basically press it and it goes, but be aware that a lot of these today are variable speed triggers. So when you press it lightly, it goes slowly, and when you push it down harder, it goes faster. So I would recommend having a little play around with this before you use your drill for the first time, so you're comfortable in how it will respond when you push the trigger. If you did go for a cordless drill, then you'll have a battery at the bottom, of course, and you'll need to take this on and off to charge. Usually they slide out, so you press the button down and then pull the drill away. To put it back on, you'll need to engage the teeth with the grips inside the drill at the bottom and slide it back on. The final part of our drill that I want to show you is our keyless chuck at the front here, and this is where we put our drill bit. Let me show you. Now I'm going to talk about drill bits and how to know which drill bit to use in just a minute, but first of all let's look at how we put the drill bits in. So we need to open and close the chuck at the front here, and you'll see that it's got this little mouth or jaws that come out, and they come together and come apart. So we need them to be far enough apart in order for us to get this roughly in place. You don't need to open it all the way to do that. And then you take the smooth bit of the drill bit and insert that into this clamp, or these jaws as we call them. Now, when that's in place, very slowly start to tighten it up. The important thing here is that you make sure it's straight. And once it's tight, then your drill bit's in place. If you're not sure when it's definitely in place, you can always loosen it again a bit and listen for the click when you tighten it up. How to choose drill bits. Right, if you're a complete beginner, it's quite a nice idea to get yourself some kind of set like this. It doesn't have to be as comprehensive as this one, but one of the good things is they often come with instructions and a guide on how to choose the drill bits anyway, how to recognise which ones you need for wood, which ones you need for metal, which ones you need for masonry, because they're all slightly different. So once you've worked out what you need, and in this box, for example, all of these bits here are for wood, these bits here are for masonry, so brick and so on, and these bits are for metal. So first of all, you need to know which type you need, of course, but next up, you will need to know what size you need. So depending on what job you're doing, perhaps you're putting up a shelf, for example, it may actually come with a guide to what size drill bit you need to use. The only thing it is worth saying about these sets is because you're getting so much in them, they're not always the best quality, so you may find that these bits break after a few uses. So when it comes to replacing the bits, then it's worth speccing up so that those bits then last a bit longer, particularly if they're ones that you're using regularly. Now, I am going to be trying to drill a hole in a wall, and I want to put a shelf up, basically, a little picture shelf, so a really small one. So it's not particularly heavy. I've got these wall plugs. That's what I'm going to put into my hole once I've drilled it, because that's going to hold my screw in place. On these wall plugs, if you just get these universal packs, they actually come with a bit of a guide to what drill bit you need and what screws you need as well. So it's really handy. At one end, it tells you the maximum and minimum screw that you can use with these size of wall plugs. And on the other end, it's got a little hole, and that tells you which drill bit you need. So that's made it nice and easy for us. And with this one, it needs a 6mm drill bit. So that's this one here. You'll find, just to check that actually will fit quite snugly in there. So we can now go about attaching that into our drill. Just on a separate note, if you want to use this as a screwdriver, The other side of this set here has got all of the screwdriver bits as well, and you'll need to match your screwdriver bit with the size of screw that you need for your job. And you'll also have another attachment, so where we're going to fit the drill bit in here, instead of that you would fit this into the end, into your chuck, and you would then use that with the correct attachment. So now we can get on to some tips for actually using your drill, and a handy one to know is that you don't want to end up drilling a hole a lot deeper than you need. So to ensure that you don't do that, you can use some decorator's tape like this. If you offer up your wall plug to your drill bit, you can determine where you're going to need to stop drilling, and then you can mark that off using a bit of tape. So when you hit the green tape, you know when to stop. Once you have the right drill bit in place, you're ready to drill your hole. Before drilling into any walls, check you know what's behind them so you don't accidentally drill into cables or pipes. You can use a pipe and cable detector to check this if you're not sure, but as a general rule, never drill directly above, below or to either side of a plug socket. Make sure you tie your hair back and secure any loose jewellery and clothing, and consider PPE such as safety goggles if there's a risk of flying debris. Also be aware that if you're using your drill on the wrong setting, particularly for screwing, you can get a kickback which can be quite jarring and you can risk injuring your wrist. More on getting the right setting for screwing in a minute. So, to use your drill for creating a hole, first of all make sure your drill is on the right setting. If you're drilling into a soft wall such as breeze block or wood, it should be on the drill setting. If, as we're doing here, you're drilling into masonry, it should be on the hammer setting. Put your drill bit on the point where you want to make your hole and lightly squeeze the trigger, keeping your drill as perpendicular as possible to help you get a straight hole. Have a dustpan ready to catch the debris. You might have seen people apply pressure to the back of their drill when drilling. This is okay for drilling into wood or soft walls, but when your drill is on the hammer setting, it is actually best avoided as it can hinder the percussion. So I'm going to attach my shelf to the walls now, which means I want to screw the screws in. I've got the right bit in the end, but I need to also make sure I have it on the right setting. I don't want it to be on hammer setting anymore. Just putting it on a kind of medium clutch setting and see how I go with that. So I'm putting up a little shelf here now. It doesn't need to be horizontal when I'm just putting the first screw in, so I'm just going to get that lined up. I've got this on the right setting, and as with the drilling, I just want to, I've seen it slipped a little bit. Always tricky when you're doing these jobs single-handed. Once again, because I've got the variable speed driver on here, I'm just going to go very, very gently to start with. I'm not going to tighten it fully until the end, and once I'm sure that it's all lined up and it's going to fit correctly. So I just wanted to show you a little bit more of this clutch in action that I was discussing earlier and the way it works, and you can come unstuck with it. So to do so, I'm going to screw some screws into this piece of wood here, which means I need a screwdriver bit. So I found the right bit that fits into the screws here. Bit of trial and error playing around with my set. So that's that bit here. But obviously this isn't going to fit into the end here very well. So what I need for my set now is an adapter, and I'm going to put it into the adapter and then fix the adapter into the chuck. Heard the click, so we know it's in. First of all, I'm going to set the clutch on 1, which is that low gear that we talked about that's good to start with, and let's see how that gets on with driving the screw in. As you can see, using the clutch on 1 means that the screw hasn't gone all the way in, it's proud of the surface. So if you were doing something like hanging up a picture, obviously you would want your screw to be sticking out of the surface, but there's going to be other instances where you want it to be flush, or even sometimes you might want it to actually be buried within your wood itself. So that's what we're trying to achieve here for the sake of demonstrating how the clutch works. So with number 1 we've got there. I'm now going to dial it up to midway, so say about number 5, and let's see how we get on this time. As as you can see, that's now pushed the screw all the way inside. So that number 5 setting was perfectly adequate for driving this screw in, and actually we possibly could have gone even lower. Just for comparison, I've now dialed it up to almost the highest setting. It's on 11 now. So let's see what happens when we use that setting. So you can see having it on that higher setting has buried that screw right inside here, which is a bit of a problem if it's not what you wanted it to do. So that's the reason you don't start on the high settings. If you want to remove screws, then switch your drill onto the reverse setting and choose a medium to high clutch setting. However, if you hear this sound, that will suggest that the clutch setting you've selected isn't high enough, so dial it up. So that is the end of my step-by-step guide for using a drill for the first time. I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone else who you think might find it useful too. And of course, feel free to add your own comments and tips in the comment box down below. If you're new here, I'd love it if you considered subscribing and come back very soon. But that is all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.